A look at downtown Cedar Falls, learning about local architecture. Welcome to our virtual architectural tour of downtown Cedar Falls. My name is Diane Schubach, and I'm the Education Coordinator for the Cedar Falls Historical Society. I'm going to be your tour guide today. I hope you enjoy it and that you learn lots. Cedar Falls, originally known as Sturgis Falls, was established in 1845 when William Sturgis settled here near the Cedar River. After he left town a few years later, the Overman brothers, John and Dempsey, renamed the town Cedar Falls. It was officially mapped and platted in 1853. Good farmland, trees for timber, and the Cedar River were three of the reasons people chose to settle here. The shallow, flat river crossing nearby made it easier for horses, wagons, and farm animals to cross the river before bridges were built. There were just a few families and children in those early days, so one teacher and a one-room school for all grades was all that was needed back then. There was a downtown area, but in those days the streets weren't paved. It was a great improvement when a boardwalk was built, so people could walk from one store to another without having to go through all the dirt and mud. The Cedar River drops about 6 feet between the Franklin Street and the highway bridges. This little waterfall provided the water power the settlers needed. Flour mills ground wheat into flour, sawmills cut logs into timber, and many other manufacturing companies located along the mill race near the downtown area used the river power as well. Cedar Falls had companies that made shoes and boots, gloves, brooms, pottery, and other things the settlers needed. The first post office was opened in 1849, the schoolhouse in 1853, and a railroad connection was established in 1861, all before the Civil War. After the Civil War, there was a real building boom in Cedar Falls. Most of the downtown buildings we're going to look at were built after the Civil War. As we go through this presentation, pay special attention to the architectural details, especially on the upper parts, on the buildings. You can learn a lot about who built them, when they were built, and how their uses have changed over the years. And a definition for us to understand: architecture is the practice or art of designing and constructing buildings. Architectural terms to know. Arch. That's the curved head of an opening like a window or doorway. Bracket. That's a supporting feature under an eave, line, or rain cap. It's usually decorative. Column. There are three basic styles of Greek columns: the plain Doric, the stylized ram's horn of the Ionic, and the very ornate Corinthian columns capped with acanthus leaves. Cornice. That is the molding that projects out from the top of a building. Dentils, which sounds like dentist, are the tooth-like projections decorating an area or square blocks in a series. Fanlights. That's an arched window with radiating glass rays that imitate a fan, usually placed over a door or window. Fleur-De-Lis is a stylized lily composed of 3 petals bound together near the bases. A frieze is any long, narrow, horizontal panel used for decorative purposes, for example, on pottery, on the walls of a room, or on the exterior walls of a building. Keystone. This is the very center stone in an arch. Mansard Roof. This was named after the French architect Francois Mansard, and it is a double slope roof with the lower slope being longer and steeper. It can be sloped on all four sides or just two sides, the front and the back. Masonry is the building of structures from individual units laid in and bound together by mortar. The most common materials of masonry construction are brick, stone, such as marble, granite, travertine, and limestone, or concrete block, glass block, and tile. Ornament. Any decoration on a building that has no structural purpose. Pediment is a small gable over a door or window. Terracotta work is a fired mixture of clay and water that can be used on the exterior or interior of a building. The material is sturdy and relatively inexpensive and can be molded into richly ornamented detail. And finally, transom. That is the horizontal framing between a door and window above, and also refers to the window above a door. Our first building is the Oster Regent Theater at 103 Main Street. This building is on the National Register of Historic Places. As the railroad spread throughout the United States to Cedar Falls, the community wanted to become part of the traveling theater audience. In 1910, a man named Frank Cotton built the theater. The building had one of the largest stages in Cedar Falls and could seat nearly 1,000 people. However, traveling theater groups were beginning to disband, so the building was sold only a few years after it was built. It changed owners about 3 times in its first 10 years. Finally, a man named Merle Blair purchased the theater in 1923 and renamed it the Regent Theater. It then became used as a movie theater. The statue that now stands outside is a tribute to Mr. Blair. His family donated the building to the Cedar Falls Community Theater, who restored it back to a stage for plays in 1994. A man named Merrill Oster gave lots of money to help restore the building, and today it is known as the Oster Regent Theater, recognizing Mr. Oster's contribution, as well as the years the building was known as the Regent Theater. Some architectural details to note. You will see Mr. Cotton's name up on the wall on a nameplate. It says Cotton Theater. When you see names on buildings, that often shows who the builder or a major investor was in paying for the building. You see the dates 1910 to 1918. You can notice the brickwork or the masonry. That's lots of different colors and some of them going in lots of different directions. You can see the big keystones over the arches in the windows. And you can see dentils running down the sides and along the top on the green part, as well as the brickwork. This building is the Blackhawk Hotel at 115 Main Street. It is also on the National Register of Historic Places. Hotels have operated on this location since 1853, making this the oldest continually operating hotel site in the state of Iowa. At one time, it was the local stagecoach stop for travelers. The hotel was first called the Winslow House, then the Western Hotel, and then the Carter House. But the building we see today was built in 1878. It was briefly named the Davis House before being called the Burr House. Around 1914, it was updated and renamed the Blackhawk Hotel. The Blackhawk Hotel got its name from Blackhawk County and from the Native American chief Blackhawk. The details we can notice on this building include the Mansard Roof, which you can see is a lot shorter and a lot steeper than a regular house roof. It slopes down from the top and does a little curve. There's a pediment at the top with 2 windows and a pointed gable. And you can see pairs of brackets holding up the eaves underneath the pediment, running all the way along the front of the building. There are also arched windows and lots of interesting variegated colors on the brickwork or masonry. This building is Stam Chocolaterie on the Phoenix block at 122 Main Street. By May of 1856, a large brick building called the Overman Block occupied this spot. It was home to many important businesses, including the Cedar Falls Gazette, which was a newspaper, a music store, and dry goods merchants. In March 1871, this building and 2 nearby buildings burnt down. A new building was built immediately on the site, and the 3rd floor was named the Phoenix Hall, after the magical bird that rises from the ashes. The hall could seat 500 to 600 people, and it was used for entertainment. Stam is now located in the 1st floor of this building. Notice that the building now is only 2 stories tall. The 3rd story was removed many years after the building was erected. Take note of the ornamentation on the front of this building. There are cornices that you can see in the close-up picture that are covered with acanthus leaves. There is an arch over the side door, and there are transom windows above the windows and the arched door and the main door of the building. This is the Cedar Falls National Bank building, now Jiva Salon Spa at 223 Main Street. The Cedar Falls National Bank was built in this location after a major explosion destroyed the existing buildings in 1907. The new bank was designed in the neoclassical revival style, which was very fancy, and was finished in December 1908. It was considered the handsomest bank building in the state of Iowa. The Cedar Falls National Bank became the Cedar Falls Trust and Savings Bank in 1927 and operated in the space until the early 1960s. Though both the inside and outside of the building were altered significantly in the 1960s, more recent work restored the exterior to its near original design. Jiva Salon Spa now occupies the building. Here you can notice the very impressive columns that are on the front of the building. They are Corinthian columns because they have those fancy acanthus leaves at the top that look kind of feathery. There is a triangular pediment at the very top of the building and a frieze running across the top underneath the pediment. You can notice that the masonry is a very light brick and that the columns are painted a light color too, probably to imitate the look of marble. This is the Security Savings Bank, now True North Insurance Company at 226 Main Street, just across from Jiva. This building was a noted architectural beauty when it was constructed for the Security Savings Bank in 1907, another version of a very fancy bank. Both the Cedar Falls and the Germania Building and Loan Associations took over the main floor in the 1930s. An insurance company uses this building right now. This is one of my favorite buildings in downtown Cedar Falls because it is just so beautiful. There is so much ornamentation on this building. There is a triangular shaped pediment at the top with carvings including the date 1907. There is a frieze that runs across from the pediment with dentils. There is all kinds of decorative work around each of the windows with little carvings and ornamentations. There's a gorgeous transom window above the door with stained glass design. And there are double doors as would befit a bank. There's also a little semi-column. There are dentils in alternating colors with the masonry. And like I said, it's just beautiful. This is the Caboose stop at 301 Main Street. The building where Caboose stop is located now was built in 1897. The ground floor was home to the L.O. Robinson Dry Goods Store. When the store opened in 1898, the band from Beloit, Wisconsin came to town and played. In addition to running his store, Lewis O. Robinson was mayor of Cedar Falls from 1901 to 1904, and he was one of the original members of the Cedar Falls Band. This is another beautiful building. It is covered with terracotta work in the upper stories. Unfortunately, in the large picture, you can see where some of those have fallen off and there's just plain red bricks at the top, but the other two feature these heads of what I think is the goddess Persephone. There are garlands of flowers swooping across the top, and the lady's head is on a background of oak leaves. There are all kinds of dentils, and there's a beautiful frieze. There are brackets holding up the eaves at the top, and it is just lovely. Flowers and oak leaves and Persephone, the goddess of springtime, all indicate that these are symbols for strength and growth and life after death, or the hope of good things after a long cold winter. So positive thoughts. This is the Oddfellows building at 401 Main Street. It is also on the National Register of Historic Places. This elaborate Beaux Arts style building, another fancy one, was completed in 1901. It was designed as a mixed-use building with a men's clothing store on the first floor, a doctor's office on the second floor, and a large open Knights of Pythias hall on the third floor. The third story later served the Independent Order of Oddfellows and other social groups. The Knights of Pythias and International Order of Oddfellows were men's social clubs. This building was listed on the National Register in 1997 and was restored a decade later. Several different businesses use space in this building right now. Architectural details for this building include the Fleur-De-Lis lily designs in the close-up picture at the top of each of those two brick columns. Underneath the nameplate of the IOOF, or Independent Order of Odd Fellows. There are dentils right above that nameplate and several other places all around the building. There are 4 columns on the lower part of the building, all topped with Ionic ram's horns. There are cornices sticking out from each corner. There are fan lights over the 2 large windows with the rays making an arch, kind of in the shape of a fan. And there are lots of arched windows with other kinds of ornamental carvings on them as well. This is the depot at 422 Main Street. The depot was built for the Burlington, Cedar Rapids, and Northern Railroad in 1887. At the peak of operations in the 1890s, 36 trains ran in and out of Cedar Falls every day. By 1896, this building was also the passenger depot for the Chicago and Great Western Railroad. It then served the Rock Island lines into the 1960s. In 1973, the building became the railroad-themed Depot Restaurant and Lounge, which was in business through the mid-1980s. From 1987 until 2015, it housed a bank. The features to note on this building include the arched windows. The up-close photo shows a cornice with brackets going up to the eaves. You'll notice that the masonry or brickwork is painted white with the large stone bricks around the bottom half. This building is kind of an odd shape, sort of an octagon, and it used to have a tower on top, probably with a clock. I hope you have enjoyed this little architectural tour of downtown Cedar Falls. We are often in a hurry to jump out of our cars and hustle in and out of buildings as quickly as we can. We look ahead, but we hardly ever look up. I am inviting you to look up. Notice the dates when buildings were constructed and names, who owned, built, or gave money to pay for the building. Notice the decorations and ornamentations. There are some really beautiful buildings on Main Street. Which was your favorite? Talk about it with your classmates.